Alright, what we're going to do today is, or what I want to show you guys, is basically how to take an image, any old regular image, and process it to get that vintage look. So I'm going to start with something like this. Relatively little has been done to it, maybe some minor adjustments with levels. And go for a more vintage look. Kind of has that hazy look to it. Add a little vignette around the edges. A little bit grittier as well. So, and all of those settings that were used to make that image can be adjusted, fine-tuned to your liking. So what I'm going to do is go through a few basic steps. It takes about 20 minutes, sometimes give or take, I guess, a few minutes, depending on how comfortable you are with working in Photoshop. First thing I'm going to do is open up the image that I need. I like the large format, so I'm going to go to image size, and whenever you consider working on a final image, I always jump up the resolution to 300, because if I ever choose to print, then 300 resolution is like the best possible quality that any modern printer can print. So I always keep it at 300. That way you get the best print quality if you ever decide to print it. I'm going to click OK there. And first thing I'm going to do is add an adjustment layer to my background. And I'm going to do that. It's going to be a levels adjustment. So I'm going to go up here to levels. And once I click on this, you'll see my levels windows pops up. I'm going to slide this black to about 8, somewhere between 8 and 10, and just leave it like that. It's a very slight change, but it helps in the end. Now what I'm going to do is duplicate this background image. I'll do that by pressing Control or Command J, and once I do that, I'm going to move this new layer to the top of the stack. So I'm going to push this right up here, and I'm going to convert this layer to, so I right click, convert it to a smart object. That way I can come back and make adjustments to it later if I need to. Next, I'm going to increase the thickness of the lines in the image, kind of give it bolder lines, which those vintage images often have. I'm going to do that by applying a filter. I'm going to go to Filter up on top, go to Other, and then High Pass. And what I want is a setting of about, I have it already set to something pretty close. I want to set it to somewhere about 14, so I can type in 14, and it will thicken up those lines. You can kind of see how it boldens everything up. Now I'm going to press OK on this, and of course this is not the final look that we're going for, but what I'm going to do now is take this layer, make sure this layer is still selected, and change my blending mode to overlay. So now you can see a little bit bolder look in the lines, a little bit more separation. So texture come out, and that's pretty cool. Cool look, easy thing to heighten in the image. Now what I'm going to do is decrease the contrast of the background layer. So I'm going to go back to here, and I'm going to add a new adjustment layer for brightness and contrast. And I'm going to take that contrast slider and push it down to somewhere about -18, -20, somewhere around that range. And I'm going to leave it at that. After that brightness, I'm going to add a curves layer. What I'm going to do is adjust each color tone a little bit differently. So I'm going to click on where it says RGB and adjust my red tones first. What I want to do is take the highlights area and increase it some. Take my shadow area and lower that some, so you get a slight S-curve, this kind of thing here. We can always come back and adjust those later. I'm going to change it to my green. I'm going to do kind of the same thing. This will help bring out some of the yellows, except I'm going to increase the highlights. I'm going to bring this neutral to right there on the line, and then I'm going to take this and lower that. So it's a lot like what we did with the red, except we added kind of put a little point here on the neutral, keep that steady. And then the blue, what I want to do is this time I'm going to decrease the blue highlights, increase the shadow highlights for the blue. Slight opposite S-curve from what I did before. So when I go back to my RGB, you should see something like that happening with your graph with curves. Now above the levels adjustments, I'm going to add a new layer, and it's going to be a solid fill of just straight magenta. So I'm going to go down here to this icon. It says create new fill or adjustment layer. I'm going to click that, and I'm going to choose the top option there where it says solid color. So it creates this here. What I want to do is change these settings. I'm going to go straight magenta, which I found to be pretty much at when you change the red area to 255, leave the green as 0, and change the blue to 255. Takes you pretty much right there. That's the color I'm looking for. Now, what this is going to do, once I change the opacity, is bring out some of those warmer tones. I'm going to drop it way down to like 6 or so. And again, since we're working with so many layers, you can adjust each of these, tinker with them to get the look that you want. And so what I'm going to do is take you through all the steps and then show you how you can make those adjustments later. So now I've done that. I'm going to go back to the background layer, and I'm going to add a hue adjustment layer right here. Saturation is what I'm going to tinker with now, and I'm going to drop that down. I'm going to desaturate it and take it down to about -20. And that'll help kind of tone down some of the color, get a little bit of washed out look. Once I've done that, I'm going to go back to my background. I'm going to duplicate this one more time. So you can either right click and duplicate or press Control Command J, and now I have my other copy here. What I'm going to do is add some noise to it. Those vintage images taken on older cameras, they tend not to have the greatest sensors, so they're a little bit noisy, and what I mean by that is kind of a gritty looking color. So I'm going to go to Filter, I'm going to go to Noise, Add Noise, and I want want this to be, well, it's actually pretty close to where I want it to be. So here's kind of a sample. You can see what I mean by noise. You see all these kind of speckled looks, and I can tinker with it, and you can see what happens. It gets even more speckled. I don't want to overdo it. I want to keep it under 10 usually. I'm actually going to put in 8, and that's usually where I kind of go as a default. And so I'm going to click OK with that. And next I want to let's see here. Also, don't forget, if you don't have your history panel up, it's real easy to get to. You can go to Window, click on History, and a little window will pop up, and you can always take those extra windows and you can slide them into place off to the side. I like to keep mine right above my layers panel. Anyhow, next thing we're going to do, again, with the older cameras, once those old pictures start to fade, you get a vignette a lot of times. So with this same layer chosen, what I want to do is go up to Filter, Lens Correction, and now your original image pops up, because all that's done to this particular layer is the noise adjustment, so you can kind of see some of the grittiness, especially in darker areas. I want to click on Custom, and these two settings are what I'm going to mess with here. The vignette, I want to drop down to -100, all the way down. You can see how that creates this little vignette around that side. And then the midpoint I want to push to 35. What that does is bring that vignette a little bit closer in. You can go even further and further, and you see the effects. Your bright area in the center kind of shrinks. So I'm going to take it back up to 35, because for the subject matter and the image, it works out pretty good. So I'm going to click OK on that, and it applies that filter. And what I'm going to do is get rid of this. And now what I have is my vintage image, and this is where you can decide, is it too much magenta, is it not enough magenta? If it is, you click on that. You can adjust the opacity, you can make it way brighter, or you can knock it down a couple. Sometimes that magenta comes out a little too much, and I might like it more at 4% now that I'm seeing the final product. Your levels you can adjust a little bit more if you want to drop some highlights. Your curves, if you want to adjust that, you can double click on these and it'll take you back to the settings that you chose. If you want to tinker around with the colors, you want to see what it looks like with deeper red shadows, and you can drag that down, or dropping the shadows from the red, you can drop that curve down. All depends. If it's too reddish, you can tinker with these. If you see a little bit too much blue, same thing. Tinker around with your settings, try to get the look that you like, and once you finish making your adjustments, you could save your image as a Photoshop file. If you want to save all of your layers, you can do that. If you don't want to save that and you say you're finished completely, save it as a JPEG and you should be good. And that's it.